Welcome to the second in our series of conversations with the team behind DSEI. If you'd like to be involved, get in touch through social media or via the DSEI and Shephard Media websites. Today, I'm talking to retired Rear Admiral Simon Williams, formerly of the Royal Navy. He's chairman of Clarion Defence and Security, which is the organisers of DSEI and a number of other key defence events. Thanks for joining me, Simon.
Thanks for having me, Darren.
Given your background, shall we start with your opinion on how defence will be affected by current events?
Yeah, I think, as Harold Macmillan famously said, what was the thing that kept you awake at night? Events, dear boy, events. And we certainly have an event at the moment, don't we? I think, interestingly, the first edition of the UK's National Security Strategy, in the National Risk Register, the number one risk was global pandemic. So since 2008, it's been the number one risk. And it's a security risk because it poses an existential threat to the state, the structures of the state, because the state is made up of people. It's not things, it's not stuff, it's people. And the effect of a pandemic, more than almost anything else barring war, is what actually threatens the existence of the state. Terrorism, of course, upsets the balance, but to date has not actually created the conditions to threaten the existence of a state. But what the focus on this particular threat does is it can appear to mute the other underlying global threats, which, of course, haven't gone away. They don't change. They're not immutable, but actually they exist. Those geopolitical tensions, the various sources of conflict and disagreement between states have not been resolved or changed particularly. The biggest change that's occurred is the amount of money that central governments around the world are having to set aside whilst we do something that we have never done before, which is pause an entire economy. Conflict often acts as a stimulant. There's a huge amount of spending, there's a huge amount of industrial activity, but it's across the economy. The kind of stimulus that's happened through the events that we're going through have a very distorting effect on the whole of the rest of the industrial base.
I think we agree in the sense that we think there'll be a constricted environment for government spending over the next 12 months, at the very least, probably going out sort of a good 5 years to a decade. And that's certainly what our Defence Insight analysis is showing. Given that that's the case and we still face all of these challenges, how can industry help defence rise to the challenge of being able to prepare for the unknown in an environment which is very much constrained by budgets?
We could see this event as adding further emphasis to that thrust and challenge to innovate. Mm-hmm. And so when defence thinkers get together again and defence policymakers get together again, mm-hmm. and start to forge the policies that are going to create the new environment, mm-hmm. they will take out their large red pens and underscore the word innovation 3 times and beat that drum harder and drive that ever harder, because actually that's what the necessity is going to be. So we've got to start thinking about how do we see structural change and further deliver to value for money to our principal customer, the governments of the West and the developed nations.
So sort of looking in that sort of, we're about 16 months or so out from the next iteration of DSEI, towards the end of next year. Both Shephard Media and Clarion are very much in the business of connecting defence audiences and being in the cut and thrust of those debates as they're shaped. Now, we're talking to each other, you know, with the wonders of modern technology from our homes, and there'll be a lot of people in defence companies working in home offices or from the kitchen table at the moment. In this current world, how do we engage in those kind of debates? How do we look forward into getting more information, more understanding of how things are being shaped by current events? And how do we get that disseminated, looking sort of in the short term, where we deliver access to defence audiences and generate those debates, where DSEI can come into that conversation, where Clarion can come into that conversation? Where do you think are the key touch points? And again, where are there challenges or gaps that will be very difficult to fill in the current environment?
The biggest challenge we're going to face is, I touched on the fact that the defence audience, the number of people who are in government, in the military forces, will come under continued pressure in terms of numbers. And I think that's a global effect. And of course, those few people are going to be increasingly busy trying to balance ever more challenged budgets. So there's a danger to a degree that our customer turns inwards and has an active debate with themselves and forgets to a degree, because actually the suppliers are perhaps on the outside of those conversations. Our need is that we need to be as much in those conversations as is humanly possible. But having those conversations with people who you are perhaps not wholly familiar is really challenging in this virtual environment. You and I can have this conversation because we know each other. We've met each other any number of times in any number of settings. And so we can set up a conversation and we can trade and we can trust each other because we know, we know that there aren't another dozen people in the room. We know that we're not going to trip each other up because it's not in our interest to do so. And also we know each other. So my observation is that the virtual connectivity is very, very effective with established relationships. It can sustain an established relationship. I don't think it can reinforce one. It can sustain established relationships. Where the challenge lies over the next 16 months is building new relationships and how we all build those new relationships, both within business to business and business to customer. So, incumbent upon us in the defense communications business, the builders of interaction, is to provide as many touch points, both physical and virtual, as we can, to ensure that actually when we come to an event of the status of DSCI, actually we can get people together and really start meaningfully build their relationships.
One of the things I've been thinking about is how valuable trust is in the system at the moment. And I think both Clarion and Shephard are very much trusted by their audiences to be interlocutors in the industry to facilitate some of those relationship building elements. So in this time when it's very difficult for you to establish brand new relationships, how important are companies like ours in terms of being those trusted partners that can help you in the short term in building something up that you can then deliver in the longer term at an event like DSEI?
Trust underpins everything. And it's one of those truisms, it's the hardest thing to build and the easiest thing to lose. You, as a trusted interlocutor, our role is to be an advocate for the industry that we serve, and to ensure that that industry is best placed to serve the governments that we serve around the globe. So we serve both the customer and the supplier. And we, our role is to make sure that both have a productive relationship, and we provide the appropriate terms for that to happen. And therefore, we are, from a Clarion perspective, we're looking at a range of digital presentations and ways of engaging the audience from both sides, from the defense industry perspective and from government, to make sure that actually where we can keep those conversations flowing and stimulate the ideas.
If you could say there was one thing you were looking forward to about walking through those doors into DSEI in September 2021, what would that be?
Having 25,000 people in Excel on one day, and humans doing human things in the way that humans do. Shaking hands, laughing, joking, doing business, disagreeing, agreeing. What I'm really looking forward to is on that first morning, when there's 12,500, 13,000 people have walked through the door and the other 10,000 are on their way in. That's a really great feeling, because we know that that the business is healthy, and actually we're back together, because we don't get ideas alone.
No,
it's a myth that that Archimedean moment of lying in the bath and jumping out. Actually, the way we get ideas is we bounce things off each other. We come at them elliptically. We don't come at them directly. And to me, the greatest thing about something of the scale of DSEI is that there's masses of human interaction, which generates ideas and generates new approaches. And also we interact with the technology.
Thanks. I guess, this is also a way for us to contribute just in the short term to that ferment of ideas, just to give people something else to think about, something to use to generate the ideas they're going to need going forwards. So thanks very much for that chat, Simon. Thanks for joining me. For those who are interested in our continuing conversations, you can contact us through our social media channels, or go directly to the DSEI or Shephard Media websites where you can contact us directly. There will be another 3, 4, maybe more of these videos as we go along. We'll see how much interest there is. But make sure to stay tuned. And thanks again, Simon.
My pleasure.